Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 13th, 2025 Landmarks Commission meeting. Ooh.
It's like as far away from you.
I know right now, and I have new contacts. I'm sorry. In compliance with, I might do that. Yeah, thank you. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law and section 101.021 of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by a roll call vote. Recusal from any case due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the beginning of the presentation. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting has the opportunity to be heard, virtual attendants will use the raised hand feature before asking a question or making a comment. The raised hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile versions and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to use select, unmute, and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking the hand icon again and muting your microphone. Call-in users can unmute by using *6. All meeting activities are being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. All requests to speak on a particular matter submitted through the proper channels has been considered. Proper channels for comments are sending an email to the landmarks@clevelandohio.gov email address with a comment or letter, calling or leaving a message at 216-664-2532, or sending a letter or dropping off comments at City Hall located at 601 Lakeside Avenue, Suite 519. Communications with members of this body must follow proper channels for consideration. Any comments received by the stated deadline are collected by Landmark staff and disseminated to the commission members prior to any scheduled meeting.
All right, to go through the meeting rules and procedures, the chair will call each agenda item and then each applicant will be invited to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the commission in order to facilitate a smooth presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, the chair will ask Landmark's staff to summarize design review advisory committee recommendations and any public comments received. The deadline for public comments is noon on the Tuesday prior to any regularly scheduled Cleveland Landmarks Commission meeting. Any received comments are distributed to commission members prior to the meeting. Staff will identify any members of the public present and scheduled to speak. Public comment is allowed at the discretion of the chair, and any individual providing public comment is permitted 2 minutes to speak to the agenda item in which they have an interest. The chair will then request a recommendation from staff. Commission will then begin deliberations and project review, and any commission member except the chair may make a motion at any point after an agenda item has been called.
We'd like to call the March 13th Landmarks Commission meeting to order. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I actually do call roll, I just wanted to note that we have a new commission member here. Callie Mersman, the new Director of City Planning. She comes to us from the Mayor's Office, where she was the Senior Strategist for Transit Mobility. So just wanted to note that change in the role.
Excellent.
So moving on, Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Dreyer. Mr. Dulick. Here. Councilmember Gray. Mr. Lozier.
Here.
Director Mearsman.
Here.
Mr. Sambry. Here. Mr. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Krasik.
Here.
Dr. Williams.
Here.
And Ms. Trott.
Here.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum. I'd also like to note Jessica Beam and myself from Landmark staff are present. Carl Brunges is in the room now, but and then we do expect someone from the law department to be joining us shortly.
Okay, excellent. Well, then we will begin with our certificates of appropriateness. We'd like to welcome our first applicants to announce yourself and tell us about your project. Our first applicant is Home Bistro located at 12022 Mayfield Road, new signage.
Thank you. I'm Emily Gilbert. I'm the owner, along with my husband, of Home Bistro. So we are just proposing that we can get a blade sign for Home Bistro to give us a little bit more visibility on the street. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's our current storefront to the left. We, the owners of the building, did participate in 2020 in the storefront renovation project. So we do have a sign up there. You can see better in other photos. It is a lit sign. So what we're proposing is just a blade sign, no lighting. If you want to go to the next slide. This is just some of the neighboring businesses, just kind of showing what, we want to do is create a little more signage like they have. Most of them have at least two forms of signage. So Valerio's down on the left. He's got a signage on directly on his, like lettering on his building, a blade sign and a awning. Trattoria has sign on the side of their building, a awning and a blade sign. Mama Santa's blade sign, Garina's blade sign and awning, and then Etna blade sign and awning. So yeah, all of those are way more visible than we are on the street. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is our storefront and the adjacent businesses. So we have Nito's to the right. They have an awning and kind of a sign above the awning. We're the two storefronts. So the building has three storefronts. So we're the two on the right. But as you can see, like I took this on a cloudy day in January. It's not visible, especially during the daytime. The sign lights up after dark. So, in the summer, that might not be until like 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then to the left of that, you can barely see is La Dolce Vita. They actually only have a fluorescent sign, but anyways, if you want to go to the next slide. So this was pre-storefront renovation on the left. The storefront used to have an awning. The right, we obviously took out all that newer brick and everything, and just took it back to just the original brick, new windows, all of that. So yeah, the landlord did a really nice job there, I think. Next slide, please. All right, so this is what we're proposing. So you can see kind of the overhead of the location right on Mayfield Road. So just a black and white blade sign. I have there's a couple sizes. This one that I'm showing here, the bottom of the blade sign comes to the bottom of the transom wood, not the transom window. So it's only about 72 inches off the ground. So our storefront's pretty low inside. The ceilings are high, but the storefront itself is pretty low. So yeah, so that's basically the look of it. It would be attached into there's actually already holes in the mortar where I guess maybe the previous awning or another sign had been. So we'd use those holes in the mortar to attach this sign there with a bracket. So yeah, just a black sign with white vinyl letters, pretty basic. If you want to go to the next slide. I did throw in this slide that the original proposed sign was a little bit smaller. The mock-up is white with black lettering. We aren't going to do that. We're going to do the black with the white lettering. But it was only 18 inches by 24 inches as opposed to the 30 by 30. But then when I was working with Terry Sandy and Tim Barrett, Tim suggested that the sign should go to the bottom of the transom. That obviously from the street could look a little bit low, so we're open to it not being that low. It could be, it could be this 18 by 24 inch size, or if we took it to the bottom of the window and not to the bottom of the kind of wood, that would be about a 20. We could do like a 30 by 24 inch. So it's open to what kind of how far off the ground you guys think it should be. And then if you want to go to the next slide, this is a drawing of the storefront showing the measurements. So like I said, if we do the 30 by 30 inch sign, it'd be 7 feet 2 inches off the ground. If we just took it to the bottom of that transom window, that would give us an additional 6 inches. So it could be 7 feet 8 inches off the ground, 24 inch by 30 sign. Or if we took it to the sign on the previous size on the previous slide, it would be 84 inches off the ground. So I'd probably lean toward it being 24 by 30. So that would be 7 feet 8 inches off the ground. Anyways, but like I said, that's what you guys think would be appropriate. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is just, like I said, it's a basic sign. So materials are the metal cleats, it's a metal bracket. The sign would hang off of a 1/8 inch thick, metal rod there. Or sorry, the sign itself is 1/8 inch thick and with raised vinyl lettering. The pole that would hang on is 2 inches. So yeah, that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Before we get to our questions, can we have an overview of the design review recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Greater Northeast Historic Design Review Advisory Committee on the 4th. They did not have quorum, but the committee members that were present did discuss the signage, the height of it, because it is a bit low, as our applicant mentioned, could get, hit by people walking down the street, who knows? And so they recommended or kind of suggested looking at having it hit the bottom of the transom window and glazing instead of the bottom of the transom bar as a possible option, which is kind of in between the two options that are presented today. Overall, they were supportive of it, the members that were present, and just kind of suggested that it was a little bit higher from the ground. Also note that it was also supported by Little Italy Redevelopment Corporation as well.
Excellent, thank you. The landmarks, staff recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Ms. Gilbert mentioned, the building did go through the storefront renovation program a few years ago. And this signage was always kind of part of the original design intent. I guess the storefront's been talking about it with Emily for a few years now. So happy to see it moving forward. Appreciate her willingness to kind of adjust the size based on locals' recommendations. Staff also has concern about that low hanging height. I understand the desire to have it large enough that it's visible, but you don't want someone hanging on it and ripping it down the first weekend it's up. So I think the 18 by 24 size the 8'4" off the ground is probably the safest bet. Not sure, with building and housing, they'll need a drawing that shows exactly how high that is off the ground. So you'll have to update your drawings, and they may need to tweak that based on code as well. So I guess just be aware of that. But staff recommends approval with support for any required variances.
Great, thank you. Then we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who would like to start us off? I guess I'll start us off. I think it's a very elegant, simple sign. I do appreciate that you're trying to reuse existing penetrations in the mortar joints. And I do agree with local and staff's recommendation of taking the sign to the bottom of the transom, which was the 18 by 24 height, versus to the bottom of the bar, which would bring it closer to the sidewalk level. There is a code requirement for height off the sidewalk, but I don't know it off the top of my head. Do you guys know it? 7 feet. It's 7 feet? Okay, perfect. So you're compliant regardless. But I think my preference is also to have it a little bit higher. That would be the 18 by 24.
Okay.
Mr. Strickland.
Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. I understood that the 24 by 30 size of the sign would still bring it to
Yes.
7 feet 8 inches
Mhm.
off the sidewalk, which is consistent with the lower portion of the lower termination of the glazing in that transom panel. Can we get clarification on that?
Yes, it would be. So the transom windows are, the 24 by 30 was what I was proposing as the in between of the 18 to 24 and the 30 by 30.
And that would still put it at 7 foot 8 inches off the sidewalk and
Right, correct.
aligned with the bottom of the glazing.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Mr.
So-
Strickland, for clarifying that. I guess that is my preference is a little bit larger than the 18 by 24. So the 24 by 30, that would put it at the 7 foot 8. Sorry, my contacts are really today. I'm looking, I can't get it up
Okay.
on my screen. So that would be my preference also.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Lozier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more clarifying question. So is the vertical dimension the entire height of the sign, or is it just the square or rectangle that the actual signage is on?
It's just the square rectangle that the signage is on, but the hanging part. So basically what it hangs off of is where the brick is. Once you kind of get to the window, that's kind of the size of the sign, would be like the size of the window essentially.
Okay,
So yeah, it's
got it.
just
I guess my
yeah.
guess my question or follow-up would be, if you wanted to get a bigger sign, can you have that, can you have the panel itself hang directly from the horizontal bar? So you get sort of maximize that square inches that you can get for the
Mhm.
sign itself.
Okay. Yeah.
But that said, I'm in favor of what you proposed so far, and I think that the middle ground I would be great with. But just a consideration if you wanted to get more sort of bang for the buck with the sort of the sign size itself, the panel size.
Are there questions and comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented with the 30-inch by 24-inch sign, assuming that they're going to reuse the holes in the mortar joints. And we would recommend any variances, approval for any variances.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second? Mr. Strickland?
I'll second that.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Any further discussion? Okay. Not seeing any. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Director Mearsman,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tresick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
Ms. Trot.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. Congratulations. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you.
We'll then move on to our second applicant located at 9721 Lorraine Road. New signage for Le Prive? Le Prive?
The privé?
Le Prive?
I don't know.
Actually, it's Le Prive.
Okay. Thank you for letting us know. Please
Sure.
announce yourself and tell us about your project.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. Actually, this is Jenny. Aldo could not be with us today, unfortunately. He's on another meeting. So my name is Jenny. I work with BNX. So here we want to present our sign, Le Prive. Next page, please. So as you can see here, what we have are a cloud channel letter attached to the 16 awning. Next page, please. So actually this sign is already installed. It was previously approved. We took out a few Windows designs that we have there, a few graphics, and also a banner on the wall that you can see on the side. So we took out all of this and we just keep in the cloud channel letter attached on the awning and also the graphic at the door. Here we can see the measurements of the awning and also the elevation of the side. Next page, please. On this one, we can see the structure of the cloud channel letter, which is attached on a rail for Le Prive, and also a little capsule for boutique smoke shop. Next page, please. Here you can see the measurements and also the materials of the installation. Next page, please. Here we can see the site plan and the location straight from Lorraine Avenue. And next page, please. And at the end here, we can see the surrounding. As you can see, there is a few signs with the same material and also the same structure as the one that we had here on Le Prive. So pretty much that's it. Any question?
Thank you for the presentation. We'll begin with, before we get to our questions, we will begin with design review recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed twice by the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Advisory Committee, first on February 19th, where at that meeting it was noted that there was already, all of the signage was installed on the building as well as the large banner on the side. And so it was tabled to allow for the applicant time to provide a comprehensive plan that includes all of the signage or remove the signage that wasn't part of the proposal. So they returned on March 5th with what you see today. And so with discussion about the kind of signage that's already there, the committee recommended the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness with no other signs or graphics added to the building, as well as the LED lights around the windows to be removed. They did have some comments that the signage on the door seems a little out of scale. There weren't measurements provided for that, but they did appreciate having that signage on the door. Just said it seemed a little big. And one of the comments was that the design, the building doesn't have a sign band, functional sign band that works. And so it made sense for signage to be located on the awning for this, this unit.
Excellent, thank you. And Landmark staff recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff feels that this is a creative solution for a building that, as Jessica noted, doesn't really have a sign band or a natural place for signage. You know, if it hadn't already been installed, probably could have come with other creative solutions with staff and the design review process. You can see an image of it up on the screen from when it started our design review process, all that additional signage. So we appreciate that they've removed all of that. Want to confirm that the LED lights on the front of the storefront, that banding is definitely removed. There are no zoning code issues with the signage, but there may be a building code issue since the sign projects forward from the front of the face of the awning. So just wanted to make the applicant aware of that. And that is not something that this commission can grant a variance for, since it's building as opposed to zoning code. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good creative solution. I think that the pill at the bottom, the boutique smoke shop, could have been just on the face of the valance of the awning, but all in all, I think it blends into the streetscape nicely. So yeah, I think, we'd recommend approval, just with noting that it may have some building code issues, but that'll be worked out with building and housing.
All right, excellent, thank you. We'll then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Who'd like to start us off? Ms. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like the applicant to explain the procedural issue as to how the sign was installed prior to approval by the commission and the issuance of a permit.
Would the applicant like to respond to that?
Or if the staff has any insights. I mean, how did this even come to their attention?
I could probably answer that. In the design review advisory committee meeting, it was explained that the signage wasn't installed, I believe, by a third party. And so the company was coming in as the local person for the permitting process, which we do see occasionally. There is no, I don't believe there's a currently pending permit for this. They just started the design review process and probably came to our attention because we have another project in the same district with the same company at the same time. So timing wise, I think it worked out for both coming at the same time.
Yeah, so, the reason for my question, and it's come up before, is how do we avoid this situation? What do we need to do to improve communication with building owners or even the contracting community so that they understand the permitting process that needs to be initiated before they effectuate a installation of this type of signage.
Yeah, through the chair, to Mr. Strickland, it's, I guess it's a constant struggle for staff. We are planning on doing a mailing this year to basically all of the parcels that are landmarked in the city, just as, I don't know if people will read it, but just to let them know, hey, you're in a landmark building, this is a landmark property, here are the resources, here's, who to contact if you have questions. Otherwise we work with most of the signage contractors in the city fairly often. We see BNext quite often, and I think that this was a confusion. There is a third party kind of out of town installer, because BNext is usually pretty good about pulling permits and coming through the process before they actually start manufacturing the signs, and certainly before installing. So I think the third party put the cart before the horse, and they're kind of relying on BNext to help clean up the mess.
All right. Understood. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Other questions and comments from the commission? We just lost our applicant, looks like.
Connectivity issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Other questions and comments from the commission? Not seeing any. Would someone like to put forward a motion? Michelle? Ms. Anderson?
I'll give it a stab. I move to approve with the stipulation that they remove the LED lights and that that they ensure that the permits are pulled for any and all subsequent alterations or changes.
Okay, so we have a motion. Can I just make sure that we understand your requirements? That they remove the LED lights. Can I also add any of the window graphics on the side windows and the sidewall banner? And then they continue to pursue any required approvals by building and housing? Does that
Yes.
clarify what you?
Yes.
So we have a motion with conditions. Do we have a second?
One second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Julik. So we have a motion, do we have a second, or we have a second? Do we have any further questions or comments? Not seeing any. Mr. Mustin, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Dulick? Yes. Mr. Lozier?
Yes.
Director Mersman?
Yes.
Mr. Sandberg?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Trasick?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
And Ms. Trot?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Congratulations. And she's back.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
I do apologize. I lost my internet connection for a moment. I'm so sorry.
Not a problem. We just did review on the project just to bring you up to speed, and we just voted, and that project has been approved with the conditions that were outlined at the local design review committee.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll then move on to our next applicant located at 9600 Lorraine Avenue, Bailey's Dream Child Center Care or Child Care Center, new signage.
Yeah, so pretty much this project is for an over contractor as well. We have the owner here with us. She's sharing with us. If you want to share something, Bria, before I start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bria. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay. I'm the owner of Bailey's Dream Child Care Center. This is our new baby that we're excited about. And yeah, I'm just here for the meeting and here to answer any questions that you all may have. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. Next page, please.
Could you just tell us your last name also? I'm sorry, Bree.
Bria, yeah, so that's B as in Brad, R-I-A, and then last name is Fluker, F as in Frank, L as in Larry, U-K-E-R.
Thank you so much.
Problem.
So here we want to show up the project that we have for the windows. As you can see here, these designs were previously approved, but we want to focus the attention on the importance of covering these windows to ensure the safety and the privacy of the children. We acknowledge that the city only allowed a 25% of the total window space. However, we want to clarify that these graphics should not be classified as a commercial sign or any promotional material. Actually, we just want to put the essential that individuals from the street cannot see inside of it. You know, just for the safety and the well-being of the children. This is our top priority on this project. Next page, please. So pretty much we changed the designs. In this step. Next page, please. Here we can see the back and the side of the building. Next page. Here we can see the site plan. So what we are planning is to cover the front of the building and those windows there and the side of it. Next page, please. And here we are showing just a few surrounding of the windows from a few sites that we have around of it. I think that's it of the presentation for now.
All right, thank you for the presentation. We will then move on to design review committee recommendations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This project was reviewed by the Historic West Cleveland Design Review Advisory Committee a few times. They came forward in February just for the wall sign, the illuminated wall sign that was recommended for the issuance of certificate of appropriateness with conditions because it needed to be lowered slightly to fit as you see it. And at that time, none of the window coverings was proposed. And so they returned back later in February with full window coverage. At that time, it was tabled to allow for the applicant to respond to, you know, how that fits in with the variances that are required and the kind of recommendation to have it below the transom so the transom windows are still open and not covered. And so they returned in March with the proposal you see here. And there was a lot of discussion about the appreciate the consolidation of all of the extra signage and naming to just the doors, and the colors from what was originally proposed to now was toned down a little bit, and that they recommended the issuance of certificate of appropriateness with the proposed window covering per 5060, so it's visible from if you're inside looking out, installed on the interior of the windows, with support for the needed variance, stating the safety concern for children with the daycare use.
All right, thank you for that summary, and then landmark staff recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff doesn't have any issues with the cabinet sign or the window coverings over the side and rear doors, or the signage over those entrances. We do have, I guess, some serious concerns about using covering the entire display window system on the front of the building with graphics. From my experience with this kind of perforated graphic that's being presented, it has to be installed on the outside because you have to be able to print on the surface. And so, that becomes your outside surface. And from my experience, when those are on the outside of the building, people pick at them, they get torn up, cigarette burns in them. They don't look good long, and they tend to be a little bold and bright. So if there's a way that these can be installed on the inside, we'd be very interested to hear how that process would work. But the previous chair here that you see on the screen, Genesis Daycare, they went through the storefront renovation program, and there was a discussion about how to handle the window coverings a few years ago. And they decided that these vertical blinds were sufficient and a better option than window coverings or vinyl window coverings, because they ran into that same issue of they would have to be installed on the outside, and then vandalism and just sort of, visually, the hanging blinds are better options from staff's perspective.
Okay, thank you for that recommendation. We will then open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Mr. Sandberg?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a point of clarification, are we also approving the signage and the awning as part of this package?
Yes. Yes, yeah, it's the signage, awning,
Are there
window graphics.
details on the awnings and signage that should be included with this plan?
This is what we received. I don't know if that's maybe Yanni can explain. Is this an existing awning that you're reskinning, or is this an all new awning?
Yeah, so this is an existing awning that we are going to do just a replacement of the material. So we are just going to do like a refacing. For the wall sign that was previously approved, as they mentioned, we just started with the cloud channel letters on the awning at the first, but then we decided to do the Windows graphics and the awnings, and that's why we submitted as a second part of the permit.
So that was previously approved through this body or through the local?
Through the local design.
To the local, yes. Mhm.
I guess as part of our approval, if it moves forward, I would recommend that we get detailed information on the signage. I guess another point, as part of the Secretary of the Interior standards, vinyl on the outside of the window would be reversible, 100% reversible. So I don't know that I have an issue with vinyl sticker or vinyl wrap on the windows as it pertains to the historic significance of the building. I think it would be a reversible application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandberg. Other questions and comments from the commission? Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I believe this is in a pedestrian retail overlay where, as has been mentioned, we do have some requirements around visibility into buildings. And I wonder if the applicant could speak a little bit more about the preference and proposal for vinyl over blinds, or something that just makes that storefront a little bit more active for people walking along the sidewalk while protecting the safety and privacy of the kids.
Okay, so well, we have the option to cover those windows with a different material actually, but to follow up the vibe and the design that we recreate for this beautiful daycare, we decided to do it with vinyl covering on the windows. However, there is a material that we can do that we can install inside of it, so it cannot be distraught or maybe damaged with the days or of the weather or something like that. Obviously we can take the option to do something different just to cover up the windows, but as I mentioned, we are trying to keep the essential of this beautiful daycare and try to compliance what the owner Bria wants to show up.
Can you be more specific on that alternate material that you just referenced?
Well, the second option that we have will be, you know, like curtains that we can install inside of the windows at the building, but will be just blank, you know, without any graphic or any design, just, you know, in a specific color.
So just like a standard fabric curtain is what you're referring to?
Exactly.
I see. Okay, interesting. Any additional questions and comments from the commission?
Madam Chair, I have a question about the applicant's experience with these type of graphics and how long they typically hold up to address the secretary's concern about durability of the material. The applicant can explain if they have a history of using this type of material and how it holds up.
Sure. Well, if we keep a professional way to install as we did, being honest, it can pass by more than 5 years. Because the one that we use, it's one of the best materials for vinyl. So it can take 5-10 years on the colors and the graphics, being honest. We can pass by any documentation that you need about it if you want.
And you have specific experience with not only like UV degradation, but essentially vandalism or nuisance, you know, disturbance of the material?
Actually not. We have a very good experience with this material. Pretty much all the daycares and all the graphics that we do for Windows commercials, we always use the same material. And the only way that it could be distract if something happens, you know, directly through the window, or that maybe someone can take it off, like peel it off. But if we're talking like about the weather or the environment, I would not say that this is not something that cannot happen, but on my experience, this is a pretty good material that will not be disrupted like by itself.
All right, thank you very much. So based on Mr. Sandberry's comments, I'm comfortable, since this can be reversed, that this is an appropriate application for this material. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. I guess I have just a more tactical question, and sorry if this is ignorant, but my experience with this material, that the perforated vinyl is often used on buses. I'll use that, where in the day hours you can't see in, but in the evening hours, or when we have the fall and daylight, you know, which is, let's just say from November to March, you can see into this, see through the material and see into the building or the bus. Is that the material you're proposing? So will you be able to see into the facility in the evening hours?
No, actually not. And that's why we decide to use those colors. I understand what you're saying, but usually this is a perforated vinyl that usually that you can see on those type of hours. And also the colors of the vinyl, it's something that influences you on that. As you can see, we try to use a light blue with the white color. In that way, we cannot see any transparency on the windows. So as I mentioned, if you need more details, we can pass by any PDF with all the details about this vinyl.
I think you, we probably want to have the specifics on the, or Jessica, did they already submit that, the specifics on the material and that is being used?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Right. So It doesn't say, it doesn't call out anything about the material. Okay. All right, I mean, since it's reversible, I don't have a strong issue. I would agree with staff's recommendation that I would prefer to have something on the interior of the facility versus the exterior. But that's my personal preference, because I do think I think it would be more durable, stand up, and be a little bit more inviting, versus right now it feels very, in my opinion, in my taste, it feels very like austere is not the word I'm looking for, but it's not inviting you to look into the facility as much. But from a landmarks, from the letter of the law, I guess if it's, since it is reversible, I don't have, I can be aligned with it. Other questions and comments from the commission? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like the fun and whimsical graphics that are displayed here. I am not comfortable with the percentage of the window that's being covered. And I understand the need for, privacy. I would just think there'd be another way to approach this so that you don't have, the graphics basically extending across the entire building pretty much, so that there is a more of a sense that this is a window as opposed to this is a billboard almost. So that those are my concerns. I would think there'd be a way to make it feel like there's some sort of framing of a window, so that it gives the rhythm and feel of storefront rather than, like I say, a big extended banner sign. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And I think Mr. Samberry just also asked in roller shades, things like that, that could be printed on the interior side. Is that what you're referring to, Ms. Anderson?
Yeah,
something that,
Something like that. I mean, have them so they come up from the bottom. Not sure how to approach it. Privacy, but I think the graphics is extensive to other. I
Right.
think that's a code issue too, correct?
Yes, yeah, with the graphics on there, it's considered signage by building and housing, so they would need a variance as they're well over the allowable square footage of signage for this property.
Yeah, I think this should be revisited so that the graphics can be more in line with the code and also give a feel of windows as opposed to just a wraparound sign.
thank you, Ms. Anderson. Yes, would the owner like to speak? Bria?
Hi, yes, thank you. I do thank you for, I see your all's concerns as far as the graphics and then the visibility from inside, or the feel of looking like a billboard. The concern of needing that, quote unquote, like we say, is privacy. There is a lot of activity on that street, and those rooms that are in the front are children, and to keep them, the safety of them, if you can, can see that. And so I do understand the concern as far as I guess the look of things, or how it, I guess the code, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm not privy to all of the information and all of that, how that goes. But my main concern as the owner, and parents are entrusting me with their children, is to make sure that they are safe, and if all the activity that's outside does not have any access or visibility to plan or anything like that inside of the building. And I know that the previous drawings that we had on the windows did not get approved. And so we came to come up with a new drawing to go to reflect what the code should be. And so I just, wanted to put that out there that just is a very strong need to make sure we're protecting the children that are inside due to the high activity that is on Lorraine Avenue and us being on that main street.
Did you explore ever doing it at a lower height, like a 6-foot height versus the full height of the windows? So it's
Yes. But there are apartments across the street, and so they are taller than the building. And there's residents who are on their balcony and that can look directly down into the building. And so, which is why I had proposed, can we have that higher up? To have that covering to be a little taller, so those residents on the other side cannot be on their balcony just looking down and seeing the children and what's taking place inside of those classrooms.
Okay, thank you for that information. That is helpful. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Strickland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my opinion, because there's no lettering as an element of the graphics that are proposed for the windows, I personally don't view them as a sign as much as a creative type of mural solution to solve the problem of security and lack of visibility for inside the building. So given that they're reversible, I think it's an appropriate solution to solve the problem that the applicant has. And so I'm basically in favor of this certificate of appropriateness for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. Other questions and comments from the commission? Go ahead, Bessie.
I'm wanting to underscore Ms. Anderson's point about the windows and wondering if we could just hear a little bit more from the applicant, understanding the importance of having a safe and secure daycare and also the broader importance of having daycares available in our neighborhoods as a service. Thank you for doing that business and for owning a facility like this. When you think about options like roller curtains inside that have similar designs or curtains that are hung behind that cover the whole window with smaller graphics that are maybe the rainbows and clouds and children actually on the window, can you share with us your thoughts about those alternatives and if they're acceptable compromises or if you see any issues or major concerns with those types of alternatives?
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, I do. Thank you for giving me for having the child care center and doing the business. So thank you for that that comment. So yes, I have considered, because this has been a process, about doing the curtains, but in those two rooms specifically in the front are babies, and they will be pulling and tugging on those curtains, and they will be in the way for children to be kind of like picking at it and can potentially cause harm to the children by having those curtains and then the curtain rod and the blinds. And so the easiest thing was to kind of have that area just to kind of be nothing hanging, if that makes sense. So they cannot have access to that area to mess with.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Other questions and comments from the commission? Would someone like to put forward a motion? Mr. Strickland?
Dear Madam Chair, I would like to put forth a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the plan as presented. I need a little help from Dan with regard to the treatment of any variances required, what we're authorized to approve or support versus building department.
Yeah, through the chair, since this is considered signage, you are, like, this project is over the allowable square footage. So I think just a variance, granting the additional square footage, which I think is, yes, 225.9 square footage of signage. So, yeah, if you just include in the motion, also granting a variance for that 225.9 feet of signage, you should be good.
Okay, so that's under our purview. So I would include the approval of a variance for the additional square footage of signage.
Can I recommend the requirements to submit all the details on the signage itself, the actual signage, and all details on the graphic materials to staff prior to installation?
Yes, please add that to the motion.
So we have a motion with conditions. Do we have a second?
Madam
Madam Chair,
Oh, we have two. So I think Mr. Sandberry got there a little bit quicker, but we have a motion. We have a second. Thank you both, Mr. Sandberry and Ms. Williams. Any further discussion?
I have one additional suggestion, just in considering the design of the graphics. If it is possible to frame out the individual windows a little bit more within the graphics, perhaps that would address sort of the billboard or the large slate that Michelle talked about, and would get a little bit closer to resolving some of the design concerns while addressing the functional concerns and the needs of the daycare in terms of their operating requirements.
So is that a requirement or recommendation? Are you suggesting a requirement or recommendation?
I'm going to recommend that.
Okay, Mr. Strickland, do you agree with that recommendation and like to add it to your motion?
Yes, as a recommendation rather than a requirement.
Okay, as a recommendation, Mr. Sandberry?
Sure.
All right, so then we have one additional recommendation versus requirement. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Musson, please call roll.
Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick,
Yes.
Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Director Mearsman,
Yes.
Mr. Sandberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes,
Mr. Trasick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
yes.
and Ms. Trot.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Great, congratulations. We look forward to seeing your project move forward.
Thank you all so much.
Our final certificate of appropriateness is located at 10704. How do you say that? Pasadena? Pasadena, sorry. It's one of those mornings. Pasadena Avenue. I think I do need some coffee. Porch rebuild. We'd like to welcome the applicant. Is there an applicant for this case here?
Looks like we do have Mr. Crenshaw here. Larry, if you're trying to speak, you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Mr. Crenshaw, can you try to unmute your microphone?
Dan, can you unmute it, or Carl on your end?
We cannot unmute. We can only, I guess, ask them to unmute, which,
You can
Yeah.
mute, but you can't unmute.
what's that?
You can mute, but
We can, yeah, we can mute, but we can't unmute.
Mr. Crenshaw, can you hear us and unmute your microphone?
Alternative might be moving forward with the report, Shaker Square, and then coming back to Larry and reopening certificates of appropriateness if he's trying to get a hold of him.
Let's do that. So we will close our certificates of appropriateness temporarily. We'll move on to reports and then we'll reopen the certificates of appropriateness. So we'd like to welcome the representatives for the Shaker Square Vision Plan.
Good morning, Corey Reardon with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. You have me today. I'm pinch hitting as our consultants agency LP were not available. So thank you for taking the time to review this. It is very important to the work that we're doing around Shaker Square. As many of you might know, about 2 years ago, we took over the asset out of foreclosure. We've put about $5 million into renovations of the property, mostly in systems such as roof and HVAC and sewers to really stabilize that property. And after stabilization, one of the things that we were tasked with doing is to prepare this for a bright future. So this is, we've been at the planning process for about 9 months now. Next slide. We did present to the Greater Cuyahoga Valley design review, and they seem to appreciate the effort and have a lot of positive things to say. There were a few comments around parking and traffic flow, which will be, of course, be reviewed if and when we get to that point where we're making those recommendations at the city. This culminated really, other than having these meetings with City Hall, with a public event at Atlas Cinema that was overflow in attendance. So it was highly attended, and a lot of people showed that they care a lot about the square. And so we appreciated them coming out. I'd say 175 plus people at the cinema to go through the presentation, and received high marks from the people that attended. Next slide. Yep, so that just reiterates that we had a great turnout. Next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry, I wish I had control of it because there are a few filler slides here, but next slide. So one of the things that came out very early on in the process is that we were not looking to reinvent the square. We were looking to reposition the square. The neighborhood residents wanted to see a return of a lot of the positive attributes that they remember growing up and coming to the square over multiple generations. And they wanted to see a return to that and a real caregiver approach to making sure that we're positioning it for the future. One thing that's noted is that all throughout the country, people are trying to build what the square already has, which is a retail environment that has a dense housing around it, that's pedestrian friendly and transit rich. One of the challenges that we faced in taking over the square was that coming out of the pandemic and shifting retail trends, we saw some exodus from the square of longtime tenants, and we needed to look at the retail, which I don't believe was captured in the plan or the planning process in 2018. We really didn't work with the tenants. So this was a tenant first and retail first look at what the square needs to be and how it needs to operate into the future. Next, please. This again just points to the fact that we put over $5 million into the basic maintenance upgrades, and a lot of it you can't see when you're at the square, but it was done, and the roofs are not leaking, and the sewers are not backing up, and the HVAC systems are keeping people cool and warm. So those were major steps taken. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry. This just goes over the timeline. We had 3 major community events. One was a kickoff in around May, which was a Stroll the Square event, which really took public feedback with stations outside the major points where people access the square, the RTA station, Dave's, and closer to CVS. We did an update meeting with an open house in September to gauge where we are at and to put some initial plans in front of people for their reaction, and it culminated in the launch party. In between, we had many community meetings. We were going to the farmers market, as well as down to the University Circle area and into the Buckeye neighborhood to make sure that we were getting the wide breadth of people that touch the square on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Next slide, please. We were very concerned because of where Shaker Square sits and the neighborhoods that surround it, that we really reflected the audience of Shaker Square. And you can see by where we did our main push for community engagement that we focused on areas directly around the square and made sure that people that we knew would not necessarily naturally take an online survey, etc., that we went to them and got their feedback. Next slide, please. This is just more information about our outreach and specifically around merchants and the steering committee. Next slide, please. Next. So where we ended up was with the tagline, "A new era for Cleveland Classic," and the principles that we that our goals aligned under were that we needed Shaker Square to be an inviting place to foster an authentic and welcoming everyday retail experience, to be inspiring, make Shaker Square a local and regional destination, and timeless, respect Shaker Square's history while stewarding it for the future. Next slide. So this is an overview of many of the interventions that that are recommended within the plan, and those will be reflected in the goals. Next slide, please. Next slide. I am not going to spend too much time on this, but this is from the feedback that we received, where that feedback came from, and then where the intersections of that feedback is that led to the recommendations of the plan. Next slide. So under inviting, our first goal is to sustain a diverse mix of retailers. Again, we understood that the retail dynamics were changing at the square and in the retail environment more generally. One of the more important notes or data that came out of the process was that the square can be supported by the neighborhood, or the square footage of the square that can be supported by the neighborhood is about 60%. So those are your daily users and the square footage that the neighborhood on a daily basis is accessing. And that's reflected in Dave's Supermarket and CVS, where the rest of the square, we need to be creative and positioning it for a more regional audience. That's not unique to Shaker Square itself. As you know, on the east side, as you travel to 71, there's a lot of retail, and there's an over-retailed dynamic in Cleveland as a whole. So we need to be creative and make sure we're creating a sense of place where people want to come and linger and move around the square and access the shops and dining options. Next, please. And that's where we talk about curating an engaging and memorable ground level experience. A lot of this gets into the weeds about what that right retail mix is based on local and national trends. What you will see is that there is a lot of reliance on restaurant space. Some of that in the changing environment will look more like fast casual, but we also know that many of the residents directly around the square want places to gather, and that's why Cafe Indigo's recent opening was so important, because their longtime coffee shop, Dewey's, was really a great third place, and we want to recreate that on the square. And Cafe Indigo is an attempt at that, and you can see another opening across the street in Koyakan, taking over the former Balaton space. Koyakan has a fast casual concept of tacos and accessible Mexican food, but additionally has a sit down element with a brewery concept. So that type of retail is what we're looking for. Additionally, the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, which is on the first floor, everybody appreciates the work they do for the community and the greater Cleveland area, but is that the right use for first floor space? Not really. So we're working with them on relocating to the second floor and repurposing that first floor space for more retail oriented environment. Next slide, please. Again, this goes over sort of that mix that we're looking for, and just in a little more detail. The one item to note here is that based on the trends in urban retailing, that these boxes set up very well. They're smaller spaces. We're not trying to repurpose a Best Buy on the square, right? So these are desirable spaces for more locally oriented businesses. Next page. The upper level sets up a number of issues based on it not being updated very recently or very often. And some of the spaces up there are traditional office space for small law firms, et cetera. And so there's some need to look at that and how do we create a balanced mix on that top floor. We always want to have the dentists and things like that, but the spaces do not set up well for flexible and interactive use, or things like yoga studios. So looking at how to repurpose that space in the future to be more dynamic and serve the community differently. Next slide. Next slide. So stewarding a welcoming, safe, and intuitive environment for all, much of that has to do with how people interact with the square now, and how that space is received. Right now, that green space, people see it as a possible asset, but it is very, very disconnected from the square. Additionally, the entryways and how you access the square from especially the south side don't feel inviting and don't always feel safe. So how are we creating safe spaces where people feel good about moving around the square and that sense of place, and creating that third space, not just with the retailers that are there, but also with how this outdoor space feels. Next, please. With the space and the way it sets up and the dynamics of where it sits within the retail environment on the east side, we think it's really important to support small business entrepreneurship and creative industries, because that is who will be looking at that space. And unfortunately, although there are challenges with the rent structures and the cash flow and items like that, it is a lower cost point, or lower entry point for small businesses than some of our peers on the exit ramps or just down the street at Van Aken. Next, please. Housing. we have a number of parking lots that surround the square. Parking, of course, is valuable to many of the retailers, so we are not recommending any elimination of parking, but incorporating parking into housing development around the square. Much of the housing that is recommended now, again, these are just snapshots of density typologies, etc. But much of what is recommended is in line with the scale of the buildings that are around the square. So we're replicating that. Additionally, we think by adding this vibrancy, there's some advantages to adding new construction, but by bringing more people to the square, this would be their amenity package. The square would be the amenity package, which would be attractive to the apartments and potentially developers looking at the space. Next slide, please. As we knew, housing would be one of the more intriguing aspects and more question aspects. There's a few slides here, but again, you're just seeing different typologies and where they could fit. Now, one of the unknowns is this building on the southeastern portion, which is the Shafran building, which I think you reviewed last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. That does not show because that is not part of the Shaker Square footprint, so we don't control that, but all of the other development in the area, which we hope Shafran moves forward and would be one of the first developments to move forward. But these are all Shaker Square properties that are owned by Shaker Square, which is us. Next slide. The second principle is inspiring, make Shaker Square a local and regional destination. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, except for the green space elements. So this is the arrival sequence that I talked a little bit about. These are where you can access from a pedestrian standpoint. Those arrows are how you get through these tunnels. The tunnels from the south side are open-ended. The north side CVS entrance is all enclosed. And then promenade, how are people circulating around? And then, of course, the green, which has been discussed for many years. Next slide. So we really want to improve the accessibility and connectivity to the surrounding neighborhoods. This just sort of maps out where the major travel points are. Next slide. So this is entering from the parking lot. For those that know the area or know the Dave's parking lot, this is entering from that. So it's creating a more pedestrian friendly arrival and also doing some branding along with that. So you're not just, so you sort of have directional cues on how to enter the square. We have already started some work on this. Now, this is just an image for holding, but we are going to be lighting that tunnel as well as putting some lighting on the cinema side of the entryway, and I'm sure that will need to come back to you for conversation. So you should be seeing that soon. Next slide. Create better connections between the green space and the promenade to improve accessibility and support foot traffic and retail activity. And this is really important to the experience. There are a couple of key points to how people flow through or how we would like to see them flow through. That is increasing sorry, I lost my train of thought. The promenade itself, which is from the building wall to the street, will be changed. Hopefully we can create a cohesiveness across those quadrants. And what you see in there, and hopefully there's another slide in here that will show this in greater detail, is that there are spaces here for patio expansions, mostly related to restaurants, but additionally in front of the areas where we don't foresee restaurant space, there are flexible spaces for community use. So you are not in the quote unquote private space of the restaurants, but you can gather in those spaces and they can be configured in different ways that that create places to gather. Additionally, on the green side, next slide, please. Hopefully it gives me a little better. So here's the promenade, right? And we're just trying to create a more seamless environment where the street furniture and things like that are planned out, and that people can flow through, and there are the gathering spaces outside. Next slide. I don't know how well you can see this, but it really looks at the green space, and you can see that the circles in purple and green are places that we're looking to activate. One of the themes that the planning team came up with is a lot of great urban spaces are two-sided. So when you're walking down great streets, they usually have two sides to them. And this, it just sort of bleeds out into this green space that doesn't feel really well connected. So how do we reflect the activity of the promenade and the retail across the street into the green space? So there is some hardscaping involved, which will show in an upcoming slide, but activate those spaces on the corners, connect those spaces through better crosswalks and lighting and accessibility, ring the entirety of the green spaces with sidewalks so people feel like they're supposed to be accessing that space. And then those corners, for example, the corner that is next to the dance school, perhaps we create a stage environment on that outer edge that can be activated by the dance studio, by other performance groups that would like to utilize that. The green space itself in the center was viewed very favorably by the neighbors, even though it was underutilized, and they wanted that space in their neighborhood to as open space that could be activated in different ways, whether it's kids kicking around a soccer ball, or you put cornhole and have a gathering out there with families, etc. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Give us 1 second. They were having a little issues with the slides.
No, that's okay. I thought this was supposed to be Friday, so I was going to use my day today to go through the slides. So I don't actually know what the next slide is. Otherwise, I could just go ahead and and speak through it. But
It should be coming up here momentarily.
yep, no problem.
There we
I
go.
will say, as it's loading here, that there was talk in the former iterations of plans back, I think, in 2019 about closing Shaker Square. It was determined very early on, one, that was a hot button issue, but two, there was so much work to do around the square and in rejuvenating the retail and making the promenade be more seamless, and then working on just the outer edges of the green space, that there was a thought that it would be detracting from what needs to happen at Shaker Square in the first few years to talk about closing down and creating more of a central focus on what Shaker Square or Shaker Boulevard means to the square. That was not the intent of this plan. It certainly can be revisited, and you will see in one of these slides, or if not in this slide, there's a 108-page document that is accessible through the Shaker Square website. This is a version of that thinned down, but it would show bollards to close the space as necessary. And each quad could be separately closed based on how you wanted to activate different parts of the square. This shows what that green looks like. You can see there's sort of an edge to the green, and then it moves into more just open space, and looking at planning that those corners can be planned out with events, et cetera, and that green space is more there to be utilized in a passive way. Next slide. So one of the things that is important in any community when you're looking to bring excitement back is how are you programming that space. So we could spend a lot of effort in redesigning the square, redesigning the green space, but we really need to look at how we're activating that space and inviting people back into the square, whether they're new to the square or they haven't been in a while. How are we engaging with them in ways that celebrate the square and also bring people to the retail? We currently are working on a contract with a impresario. I'm not sure I love the term, but it's what's stuck so far to program that space. Right now, we've been doing, the farmers market, which is independent of us, and then we did a summer concert series. We would like to see more activity throughout the summer on a weekly basis. That's bringing people out and inviting them back. Next slide. Timeless is our third principle. Again, respecting Shaker Square's history while stewarding it for the future. Next slide. Some of this has to do with just refreshing how we're telling the story of Shaker Square. Again, we think it is an asset for the city of Cleveland. We think that people throughout the country are trying to build what Shaker Square has. How do we publicize that and reassert Shaker Square's place in the story of the surrounding neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland? Some of that's inside baseball, where we need to do new signage to reflect our new branding and also digitize a number of things. Next, please. Protecting Shaker Square's authentic advantage. This mapping here shows different areas of the city, different neighborhoods, how they are along this spectrum of activity and how they feel, and where Shaker Square fits, so that we're looking at each investment that we're making, each tenant, and how they fit into where we would like to see Shaker Square positioned in that competitive environment. Next slide. This shows a little bit of some of that community work and what draws people to Shaker Square, and then what are those elements of place that are important to Shaker Square, and how, again, back to positioning Shaker Square for the future and within that competitive environment. Next slide, please. And again, a little bit internal to how we need to operate the square, but deploying strategic leasing techniques to attract and retain tenants that complement the vision for Shaker Square. I really see this as, what is that right tenant mix? As much as we can control that, which we do have a lot of control over that, what are the right pieces that fit? And how do they work together so that we are creating an environment for, you can't please everyone all the time, but we think that the square can work for the neighborhood surrounding it in different ways. So how does Dave's and CVS reflect what our strategy is, and then how do the new businesses reflect what that strategy is? And our strategy really is to make it work for the everyday user while positioning it for a regional demographic that want to come in on the for the restaurants and for any boutique offerings that we can provide. Next, please. Again, safety and the perception of safety is really important to the Shaker Square audience. And so, although I have worked in other neighborhoods and feel that much of it is a perception of safety, that's real to people. So we want to make sure that we're implementing a comprehensive plan for Shaker Square, both around safety and then just those items that make you feel safe, which is a clean environment and with people around, and that we're implementing a maintenance plan to make sure that that the square is inviting. Next, please. So partnering for success. This is about the future. This is about the realities of the square and where we are at from an ownership perspective and what we need to do moving forward, which I'm more than happy to talk about, but it gets into some of the financials of the project and what we need to do to make it more attractive from a positioning standpoint for future owners, and perhaps where we fit in that picture, and especially how it relates to the green space, because there are 7 acres of land that do not produce any income for any future owner, and what is the right ownership strategy to ensure that that green space is well maintained and inviting and serves the community while is not an economic anchor on being able to position the retail for the future. Next slide. And this goes over what some of those partnership models might look like. Next slide. And that is it. I think the final slide is a summary of the goals and how they relate to the principles. This is a QR code where you can access the entire plan, which is 108 pages of more detail into the goals and strategies. Any questions? It's perfect. Great.
I don't know if there's any talking in the room, but we aren't able to hear anything on our end if you guys are talking.
Okay.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, something got muted on the main panel. So Jessica was just telling us about the local feedback.
Okay. All right. So yes, it went to Greater Cuyahoga Valley Historic Design Readvisory Committee. They are supportive of it with the addition of like sidewalks and traffic calming issues. Noted that additional pedestrian access points across the square, even like through the middle, would be nice, as well as kind of concerned that a traffic study might be needed for how traffic would work during peak hours around the square, with already having it getting busy when it's rush hour. So the committee was supportive for the future new pedestrian engagement, traffic calming measures, programming, and for new access points from parking to facilitate the easy flow through the site and to make it more welcoming for visitors, residents, and businesses. On a Staff notes, any installation of signage, any site feature changes, and exterior changes will be reviewed through our process moving forward. And that staff kind of notes that the future installations should match the architectural style and aesthetic of the square. It was a planned neighborhood, it was a planned development, and so it should fit that, you know, plan to some extent, and that Landmark staff is happy to work with the applicants and as they move forward.
Excellent, thank you. And Landmark staff recommendation? That's it? Together? All right, excellent. All right, then we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Dr. Williams?
Yes, thank you. As a Ward 6 resident and someone who has an apartment home on Larchmere, I think I saw a picture of our building on one of your slides. I live at 121. But I just want to say, I think it's wonderful, everything that's happening in the Larchmere Shaker Square community part of Ward 6, and was especially pleased to see that recent opening of Cafe Indigo. I think Melissa Garrett Hirsch and so many of the other entrepreneurs who are investing in our neighborhood are really doing a great job. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Other questions and comments from the commission? Mr. Lozier?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say how impressed and excited I am about just the comprehensive nature of this plan. I mean, you looked at everything from you know, the aesthetics of the space and improving that, the programming of how you can draw people to this area where it really doesn't have that draw today, to operations, to future sort of operational sort of integrity. I think this is really, really exciting and really, really well thought out and really planned out. And I personally am excited to see how this continues to be implemented over the next several years. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Lozier. I would echo that. I think this is very thoughtful and comprehensive and has looked at all aspects of this. It's such an asset to the neighborhoods. It's exciting to see the focus on this and really trying to bring it back to supports the community as it continues to develop and re-energize in this area. Other questions and comments? Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam. I'm very happy to see the city and Cleveland Neighborhood Progress step in and rescue the square. The future seemed very uncertain a couple of years ago when it was in foreclosure, and I'm so grateful that this is something that's hopefully will be turned around. And I have to say, I did not look at the whole 180-page report, which I will do. I have some questions. Being that I have a real estate background, I'm kind of used to retail space being, marketed with certain things in mind, like demographics. I don't know if they did any research on the demographics of the area and how a retail plan can complement the demographics there.
Yeah, so there was a lot of looking at the demographics, because the demographics are, I don't know if unique is the right term, but very, very diverse. So there is the northeast quadrant of the square, which has quite a bit of wealth within walking distance, and there's the southwest corner of the square, which has quite a bit of poverty. We wanted to make sure that when we did our community engagement, that we were going to both of those communities and understanding what their view of the square was. And so we did a lot of outreach and got a lot of input. Additionally, knowing that the square footage in the square is only going to be supported, 60% of that square footage can be supported by the surrounding community. That led to a lot of the conversation on decision points with what retailers were most appropriate moving forward. And again, fortunately, we have Dave's and CVS, and to some degree the theater that services that those communities, all the communities in a way, well with your everyday needs. So that 40 to 50% of the retail that we need to focus on to get that right mix to attract a greater audience than currently utilizes the square.
I have a few more questions. You mentioned that, the local population can support about 60% of the retail space that's there. Is there any rental subsidies or kind of a rental step up increase, that they can, a business can have like a starter rent and then, hopefully as the business grows and builds, a rental increase over time to assist them, new businesses coming in?
Yeah, so one of the challenges and why it went into foreclosure was that the rents were not high enough to maintain the buildings, and therefore there was a lot of deferred maintenance and was unable to make the payments. Fortunately, as we've taken over, we've been able to stabilize the property. We have it currently in the black, but barely. So most of our current price points are more introductory. We really need to, again, establish the square as a prominent retail experience and prominent retail location in order to ensure that we can over time increase those rents based on increased business, and that will put us in a much better place for the square's future. So right now there are quite a few, almost everyone is receiving a discount on, well, I don't want to say discount, but a rental rate that reflects where the square is at present.
Yeah, I have a few more questions. I don't mean to monopolize the floor here. I'm going to pivot to housing. I noticed that you have some new construction, and of course, you have some areas where probably that kind of construction would work. But my concern, and I've brought this up in the past, is the existing buildings. There's some very stately, beautiful buildings that are outside of the area of your ownership, but I think they definitely impact the square. And I feel very strongly that if any new construction is done, it's at least done in coordination, maybe the priority should be to get some of these buildings into receivership and turn them around. We already have James Lasan, who developed one of those buildings. The roof was collapsing, and now he's getting a market rate. I think he said $1,100 a month for 1-bedroom units. So I was wondering if that is part of if that's addressed at all.
Yeah, 100%. I think your questions are on point. And although the Shaker Square plan itself does not address that, after, for when we started, I think there might have been some criticism that Shaker Square was getting all of the attention, and there were some issues around it. But we really needed to stabilize this asset. And over the last 6 months, we have lifted our head up and said, hey, Shaker Square doesn't exist in a vacuum. What is happening around Shaker Square, and how can we engage in that? And so we are actively engaged with the Morelands Group on what is known as the Steiner foreclosure properties, and that is 15 buildings and 308 units. They are currently in federal foreclosure from on non-payment of Fannie Mae principal. And there's a receiver for that property, and we are working to figure out how to exert some community control to ensure that the reason that those buildings are in their current state has a lot to do with them being sold at their at the investor frenzy and the highest price that they were valued at the time in the mid to late 2010s. And the reality is what was paid for them, they could not support with rents. And a lot of those buildings on North and South Moreland are facing foreclosure. So how do we interact positively in that space, exert some community control, and try to find ownership, local ownership, potentially local ownership, hopefully, that will be more in tune with the needs of those properties and look at them as long-term investments rather than short-term flips.
Well, that's good to hear. I guess I have one last comment question. And I'm hopefully I can articulate this. I would think that whatever draw pedestrians we bring into the square, the goal is to have it a viable retail space, that the businesses there can thrive and it'll be a successful shopping area. I just wanted to ask if how you balance, bringing people into the space, but making the circulation of the pedestrians there, having them interact with businesses. I think that I think that's probably the way that the public should be brought in as clientele consumers, and the businesses should be responding to the needs of the persons in the area. So I'm having trouble articulating this, but I just want to see that the goal is to make this a retail area. Sometimes some of the description sounds more like a park. So that's my that's the issue that I'm having here.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, so I think there's a balance to be struck. I think that when we were looking at the green space, we did talk a lot about how it responds to the retail environment, but additionally, the community had a response as far as how they wanted to see that green space operate for the benefit of the neighbors. I do think it's about how you curate that experience. So any owner will need to curate the experience of the person entering the square, from the entryways to how you flow through that space. And that's what a lot of the conversation is. When you park your car in the back lot behind Dave's, how are you entering that space? When you enter that space, how is the promenade reflecting the activity of the retailers there, while giving some flexibility to linger in that space? And what we know is the more people linger, the more people spend money in those spaces, right? So the longer times that people spend in space, that's what all these environments are built for in a lot of ways, especially the lifestyle centers that are coming up, is they want you to flow through that space in different ways. So understanding that and then curating it to make sure that we are inviting, and then the retailers reflect the type of culture that we want to have around the square.
Yeah, I get your point here. I just want to see people interacting with the shops. I just don't want to see where people are kind of loitering, or I would hope that there's a give and take between the public and the assets that are being brought in here. I think for now, those are my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And I think just to, per your points, programming is key to any type of green space to activate it so that it supports the retail versus becomes a nuisance to the retail is where I'm listening to your comments. But so thank you for those comments. Other questions and comments?
Thank you, Corey, for the presentation. I'm wanting to talk a little bit more about the committee's recommendations around pedestrian connectivity, which is also pulled out as a need in the plan process, specifically like through the square and connecting all 4 quadrants. It's complicated here because there's a rail line right down the middle of it. And I wonder if you could just share any details that you're aware of conversations around that through the planning process. Like, is the plan's understanding that we are sort of confined to crossing the rail line at the existing crossings? Are there opportunities for other sort of mid-square crossings? Any additional detail you could add that came up in conversations would be helpful.
Yeah, I think some of the recommendations were meant to be implementable on a timeline. And I think it was clear that speaking with RTA, though, we do think those connections and crossings need to be improved. Some of the larger ideas of like crossing those tracks in the middle were just deemed to be a far-fetched. I don't want to put it like that. I think the ideas are great, but based on the regulations that the tracks represent at the federal level, that at-grade crossings and improving those were more key to the presentation. We did talk about activating some of that RTA space so that people could really appreciate the trains coming through there if that's something that they enjoy or the kids had space to watch. But those were some of the conversations about safe upgraded crossings and then how to activate that space for the joy that it could bring people. However, those regulations are difficult. Then a lot of the connectivity, and you can see some variation. It would be varied paving and things like that at the north and south Moreland entrances, and that's really to, as you enter that space, to slow traffic down, to say you're entering a space that's different, and to make it more pedestrian oriented. And there would be crossings in that space to access the green space sidewalk and the green space itself. So there are a lot of more, I would say, what look like smaller interventions to that pedestrian environment, but will make a large scale difference. And additionally, which there was a lot of talk, parking. I've been in the community development since 2005, and the last thing I want to do is talk about parking as the first thing in a plan, but there were some questions about parking and circulation around the square, because there is some interventions there that have parallel parking on both sides of the square and parallel parking along both sides of Shaker Boulevard, which not only replaces the head-in parking at exact numbers, but increases the parking for the square as a whole. But anything where you're parking 2 sides of the street, creating 1 lane, will slow traffic down and create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And there are recommendations for bump outs and things like that that will also increase the pedestrian experience and create more safe crossings. Did that cover your question?
Yes, thanks so much.
All right, other questions and comments by the commission? Bring this forward the motion or just
Just a report.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your time. Or I'll ask one more time. Any other questions or comments? All right. So since this isn't, this is just an update, we appreciate you coming and updating the commission. I think this is very helpful and look forward to continued to be part of the process and the evolution of this design.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present and apologize that I thought it was tomorrow. So thanks for jumping on that and getting me the information today.
Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. So, all right, so that concludes our reports for today. We will then move back to certificates of appropriateness and see if Mr. Crenshaw is able to unmute and tell us about your project.
Yes, how you doing? My name is Larry Crenshaw.
Welcome.
I was trying to see the video. Oh, yes. How you doing? Yes, basically is I'm putting my back porch, front porch, and the door up. So the first 3 slides are basically the area, Pasadena 10704, my residence. Okay, so this first slide, it says mark with yellow, but I didn't mark it. It's the gray area. It's the next slide shows the door that I'm proposing to put on. It's a wooden, and it's get painted a Zulu blue. Okay, your next slide. And basically these are the prints of my porch. The next 3 slides, 4 slides are the prints of my front porch, back porch, and yeah. So basically, I believe you guys get to go through the prints. So your next slide, and this is at the last meeting I told y'all about. It's a skirt at the bottom of my porch. So these are the proposed bricks that I'm gonna put on the skirt. Your next slide. And those are the dimensions and all the price and basically the dimensions, qualifications for the material. All right, next slide. And I was also told on the last meeting that I needed to have pictures of the side of the house for the bricks, so you can see the scheme all the way around the house. So as you can see, it'll be in, it'll work with the brick scheme that I'm using in the front skirt. So it's red alley bricks, and the bricks that I'm proposing are going to be red alley bricks, but it's it's like a vinyl backing. Next slide. And this is the other side. I was just showing you that all sides would be uniform. So your next slide. And this is the remaining proposal of the front porch. You see the columns, the columns, the footers, porch sides. Next slide. And this is the drawings for the rear porch. Okay, yeah. So those first steps that you saw on the slide before will be demoed, and this will be the new porch. It'll be the steps, a landing, and then a footing at the before you come up, a concrete footing. And those are the specs of all of the material on the side. Next slide. I believe that is all the slides.
Excellent. That was a great presentation. We appreciate it. We are, before we get to our comments, we're going to review the Design Review Advisory Committee recommendations.
Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair. This was reviewed by the Greater Northeast Historic Design Review Advisory Committee on the 4th. They did not have quorum, but the committee members present were supportive of the front porch replacement. It's in line and scale with what used to be on the house, and so it does feel appropriate. They did, as the applicant noted, recommend showing the sides of the house and the foundation to show that the proposed kind of foundation of the porch would fit. And yeah, otherwise, we're appreciative of seeing that porch replaced on the home.
Excellent. Thank you. And Landmark's staff recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, staff is fully supportive of this. We saw this project recently at the commission level a few meetings ago for windows and siding, which you guys granted a certificate of appropriateness for. So Mr. Crenshaw is just trying to, I guess, finalize the last few details of his complete rehab so he can move forward. You can see the previous porch that's now gone on the house in this image. So what Mr. Crenshaw is proposing, matches it in different materials, but the same footprint, same lines, essentially. So our only real questions from staff are just the details of how the railings are going to be installed. Is it a simple square, 2-inch railing, and then just ensuring that those go between the top and bottom rail instead of being like tacked onto the front, that sort of thing. So if we could just get a detail of that, I think we would be happy and recommend approval.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll open up the floor to the commission for questions and comments. Ms. Anderson?
I first want to commend the applicant. I really appreciate you taking on this ambitious project. I think it's going to be a beautiful home. It's got great bones, and it sounds like you have your heart in the right place. The material of the porch railings and columns, I just wanted to ask what those materials are.
It'll be a pressure treated lumber, and basically pressure treated lumber, and the columns will be a pressure treated lumber, and it will also be covered in the skirt. The same skirt at the bottom, it'll be covered in the brick skirt going up the columns.
Thank you. I have a follow-up. Being that it's pressure treated, that can be a little hard to paint, right?
What are you saying that's going to be painted?
I would think that the pressure treated railings and spindles would really not work with the historic look of the house, and that they probably should be the trim color or white or.
Oh, so you would go with a vinyl instead of a.
I wasn't going there.
There's only so much material, so you would go with metal then.
I think she's saying that she'd want it to be finished and painted, and pressure treated is not always ideal to paint. It can be painted. It's painted very often. But I think what you're saying, Ms. Anderson, is that you don't want to see the virgin, pressure treated, that if you're using pressure treated, it should be painted.
It should be painted, yeah. It should
Match
not
the trim
be
color.
that, that greenish woody color that you see on pressure treated wood. That would, I think, really detract from the overall look of the house.
Okay, and if I do paint it, it would have to be up for at least a year before it's actually painted and the wood is dried out.
I would probably make that a stipulation that after a year that, you know, a trim color or, you know, an appropriate color paint be applied to those railings because, otherwise it, you know, I think it cheapens the look of the house when they put those pressure treated, railings up.
It actually stained as well.
It can be stained as well.
Yeah.
You know, like, you mean to stain the pressure treated lumber?
Yeah, the pressure treated lumber also can be stained or painted. I was just putting it out there.
Yeah, you know, maybe you can work with staff on, you know, on color and what you want to apply to that pressure treated lumber. But yeah, I think if it stays just that pressure treated lumber, it to me, it's just kind of like a, you know, a cheap rental housing look. You know, this is a really grand home. I think something befitting the rest of the architecture needs to be done with the porch.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Anderson.
Yeah.
Other questions and comments from the commission? I stepped out of the room, so I don't know if there's any other feedback or if someone would like to put forward a motion. Ms. Anderson?
I move that we approve as presented with the condition that the porch railings are painted or stained as soon as they're able to be painted and stained, an appropriate color that works with the house, and have the applicant work with staff on that condition.
Can I provide a little could I ask for a clarification to that? Could I ask for a clarification? Could we just say that all wood shall be finished to match or finished within 1 year of installation and to work with staff on the final finish application?
Yes.
And can I also suggest that on the submission of all details of the porch rails be submitted to staff for approval?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion with conditions.
I'll second.
Mr. Samberry seconds. Any further discussion? All right, not seeing any. Mr. Musson, please call roll.
All right, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Dulick? Yes. Mr. Lozier,
Yes.
Director Mersman,
Yes.
Mr. Samberry,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Trassick,
Yes.
Dr. Williams,
Yes.
and Ms. Trout.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Congratulations. We look forward to seeing you continue on in the development of your house. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So
That concludes our. Go ahead.
one question. So do I need to get the schematics for the rails and the conditions? Do I need to put the conditions in before they are approved and sent to the to building?
Yes, yeah. If you just email those to me, we can work out the final details and then I'll clear the permit and then it'll move on to building plan review.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow then.
Thanks,
All
Leslie.
right. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, have a good day.
You too. So that concludes our certificates of appropriateness. We'll then move on to administrative reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is a National Alliance on Preservation Commissions, which we're a member of. They're doing a webinar about deconstruction and versus demolition. Staff was planning on attending it. If any of the commission members are interested in attending, let me know and I can forward you the information. I can send out just some general information about that too, but that's March 27th for anyone who's interested. And then again, just wanted to welcome Director Mersman to the commission and thank Assistant Director Marka Fields for stepping in the interim for these past few months. So welcome.
Yes, welcome.
That's all I have.
Excellent. All right, well, I just believe that's all we have then for today, and we will adjourn today's meeting and see everyone in 2 weeks. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.